I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. And today we normally talk about community building, wealth building. We want to have open, sometimes planned, and sometimes unscripted conversations about building wealth in our community. And so today is an occasion where we are inviting you, if you're listening on YouTube or on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, to come on the screen, come on and talk with me about your ideas of what it takes to build community, to build wealth in our community. While I'm looking for some of you to weigh in, to join in, let me post in a minute the URL for you to join the call, and we welcome your ideas and your thoughts. But let me give you some background on the concept of the conversation, this program. Yesterday was a very cool program because we presented a new feature, a live music performance from the Dakota nightclub in downtown Minneapolis. We presented the rehearsal for my brother's band, Wayne McFarlane and Friends, who were booked to play the club last night. They had a great program last night, but it was fun to have them during their setup and rehearsal share that experience with us here on our live broadcast. Our Tuesday program always features a live radio broadcast on KFAI FM 90.3 in Minneapolis, and it goes to the World Wide Web, as well as the KFAI broadcast. Like we always do, stream to the various social media platforms that we connect with and through, like YouTube. In YouTube, we are out on the Black Press USA platform and also on the Insight News platform. We also connect and distribute the signal through Facebook Insight News and Facebook Black Press USA. We've also added Twitter and LinkedIn as channels where you can get the newspaper, not the newspaper, but get the program. So we're doing a lot of things in that space, and we enjoy so much the ability to use this technology to connect you with our community. Well, the theme is different every day. On Mondays, we talk about neighborhood politics. We call it governance at the neighborhood level. On Tuesday, we focus on culture and community. Tuesdays, typically, we connect with musicians, artists, thinkers from around the world, from as far as Brazil, from Colombia, and from Ghana, and even Ethiopia, Europe, other places. But the idea is to show our cultural connectedness globally and use technology to do that. Wednesdays, as I said, is a show that we focus on community building and wealth building. And Thursday, I've got a group of friends that I've been connected with since way back when. And I've invited them to join me on Thursdays to just talk about whatever is on our minds. The fun part about the Thursday program is that the principals, the close-in group, include my co-host, Brenda Lyle-Gray, and my first cousin, Dean Burnell Venable Powell, retired dean of the law school at University of South Carolina at Columbia, and also former dean of the law school at University of Missouri at Kansas City. And along with Yusuf and Jeannie, who's from Twin Cities here, and a young brother named Kamal King, Brenda, Kamal, Burnell, and I were all in kindergarten together in Kansas City way back when. So it's fun for us to be together in this program, sort of looking at the world that we've lived through, reviewing what our expectations were as children, and what we still see as work that we can do, work that must be done to build the kind of community. Finally, Fridays, we focus on health and well-being. The Friday program is called The Healing Circle. My colleague there is Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya. She is the principal at the African American Child Wellness Institute. She's a psychologist. Her company is called Brakens Consulting and Psychological Services. And she brings a group of doctors and therapists and physicians and community activists together for a conversation on the health of our community, our health as individuals, as families, and to look at the pressures that we endure and survive and actually surmount, that we overcome in being healthy and deserving individuals. So that's kind of what we do. Today's program focuses on community. I call it community wealth building. I'm pleased to have Laura Garcia here and Adrienne Diercks, who are both members of an important project called Project Success. Also, who is here is my colleague Brenda Lyle-Gray. Welcome, Laura. Welcome, Adrienne, and welcome, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Good to see all of you.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Thank you.
Good to have you here too. Brenda, how you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you? And how are both of our guests?
Wonderful. Nice to see you, Brenda.
Good seeing you.
Like I was saying, Laura and Adrienne, Brenda and I were in the kindergarten together.
Yes.
And so we're both 74, 75 now. So we've been out here a long time. But it's a good thing that we are able to be together now and to reflect and to have survived, number one, but also to be hopeful and positive about a future that we can work to build together. Well, I'm so excited to have Project Success on the program. Let me take another minute to say why we're doing this one. I'm on the board of the Greater Twin Cities United Way. I'm the board vice chair. And I talked to our team there and said, I've got this phenomenal set of platforms, and we have a lot of organizations that are friends and partners and stakeholders in the work that we've envisioned, articulated as the mission of Greater Twin Cities United Way. And we actually execute our vision by working with organizations like Project Success. And so I said, why don't I invite all of our stakeholders, as many as would like to come on and tell their story, to sort of build awareness and to create more support for the vision and the work. And that's why we're here today. So let me stop with that and ask you both to give us Project Success 101. What's the story? What's the background? What's the vision? What's the mission? And who should go first, Adrienne or Laura?
Laura, why don't you go first?
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. One of my favorite things to do is talk about our mission and our vision because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. We help students connect to their purpose, and we do that with providing them accessible opportunities that give them a chance to gain information about what it is that they want to do with their future. And they get to define their success. They get to try things and say, that's not for me. They have the opportunity to make informed decisions. So I think that our mission is to help students also have a hope and a spark where they can get through adversity or obstacles that might be put in place in front of them that they maybe didn't have control over. And it allows them to have that strength and a community around them that also lifts them up and pushes them towards their goals and their dreams.
Awesome. Well, let me tell people that Laura Garcia is the Director of Schools and Curriculum at Project Success, and Adrienne is the Executive Director. Adrienne, again, thank you so much for what you do for Project Success and talking to get connected with you. I was told that you are a light, always on and always with lots to say and lots to do, and committed to that. So I love that kind of energy, and I thank you for being the person that you are and the leadership you're providing to our community, to these families, to the students that you connect and help grow through Project Success. What's the background? How did this project come into being? And how long have you been associated with it?
So I'm the founder as well, but I'm a Minneapolis Public Schools grad. You two talk about being in kindergarten together. I went through all the Minneapolis Public Schools. and born and raised. And I was raised by a single mom of 4 of us kids, and she's still an actor today at almost 90. So Al, when I read about what inspired, I grew up in theater. I grew up with struggles, like everyone, and I grew up with a great light in my mom and in my grandparents. And when they said it, we can't put you through school, you can do it, but you got to figure out what you're going to do, where you're going to add to the world and use your skills. And so I took that very literally at 11 years old. And I'm like, so what should I be doing? Anyway, skip ahead to really the gift of life, which is that after college, I basically had this, there's a story there, but just had this feeling of like, what if every young person, I had a good education in Minneapolis, I had a good education in college, what if every young person starting when they're 11 really could explore, who am I? What's out there in this world, in my community, in the greater world, and what do I want to do in that world? Not just my job, but who am I? My mom and my grandmother read me a poem when I was young that said, there's no one in this entire world that is exactly like you. And I remember hitting me and saying, so what if every young person who's unique, as Lauda said, could explore, not alone, not in only one group of friends, but with every single child in their school. And not just for 1 year or 1 hour. But at Project Success, we do that from 6th grade in Minneapolis all the way to 12th grade. So you build on year over year over year. You build on relationships. So Al, I loved what you talked about with each day of your shows, what you do each day. We build from 6th grade to 12th grade. We don't tell anyone what to do. We facilitate with our community, with our families, experiences, workshops, opportunities of excellence, of high quality, where we bring people together so they can answer those questions for themselves, with their peers, and with their families. And so we just entered, we're in our 28th year. And that's kind of where it began. And I'll just say that, like everything, it is about love. When we talk about what powers our mission, it is love. It is knowing and believing in every single young person. It is doing it together with our families, our students, and our community. And I love what you talk about on your show. It's doing our piece. What's our piece? And our piece is about that, those opportunities and experiences. And now, Al, from 28 years ago, we have a team of nearly 40. Many, many of them are alumni that have come all through Minneapolis and now are facilitators in the classroom. And the last thing I'll say is that when you say where were our roots, when I had this idea, thanks to many people in my life, I went to my middle school teacher, George Roberts, who taught me at Ann Watton, who was at North High. And I went to Cheryl Creasy, who was my art teacher at Ann Watton and now was a principal, and went to my principal from West High after it closed. And they said, well, it might not work, but we're going to help you try. So from the beginning, they believed in my dream. And that's what we're all about, is dreams and community and doing that together. So it's an honor.
That's amazing. So as you mentioned, that connection to community in the formation and the bringing of the idea online into life, I was flashing back to how Insight got started.
Yes.
And you mentioned George Robert. George lives down the street from me here and has the gallery around the corner on Plymouth Avenue, the Homewood Studios, and has been doing a lot of wonderful work in the community for years and years, particularly as a principal or a leader in schools here. So that mention that you made, Adrienne, reminded me of sitting with my neighbors here in the Homewood neighborhood back in 1970, it must have been 73 or 74, maybe 75, asking for community support to launch my idea for a community newspaper. And the neighborhoods, Woodward Homewood and the Jordan area community and Hawthorne Neighborhood Association all voted to use CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, to support advertising with Insight News. That's how we got the paper started. So I resonate with your story about the importance of people in your lives that believe in you, that bring things forward for you, through you. That's wonderful. And so, as you were developing the idea, what did you see in your mind's eye? I mean, where were you working first before you really embarked on bringing this project into fruition?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, we started, again, this idea. I did some workshops just on my own where people said, but you're only 22 and what do you know? And you're not a trained facilitator. And I never poo-pooed that. I was like, that's true. But I feel like facilitating is about us being in a room together and we all have something to give. So I did a lot of falling on my face in the early days, but it really began in the office at North High School with George Roberts. Soon after that with Birch Jones, and with the head of theater and the head of counselors. And one of the first things was, so it began there. It was people wondering, do students need this? And I remember being a Minneapolis public school recent grad saying, I'm not saying nobody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, but I'm saying, what if we could do more so that all students had even more opportunities to not wait? The biggest thing I saw and felt in myself and saw in my peers is, if you wait till the end of when you graduate, high school, college, whatever it is, and you don't make some decisions, then your choices are more limited because you're up there to the finish line in some ways. And so what I saw was, when I first went into my George Roberts classroom, Miss AQ's classroom, Martha Harris's classroom, when people were like, so there were two things, Al, we wanted to do when we first got there, it was about workshops. It was about going into the classroom. So one thing I saw is not pulling students out, not assuming anything about a young person. People assume things about me that weren't right. We all make assumptions about people. So what if we work with every student? And that was hard. People said, well, not everyone needs it. I'm like, but we all need each other.
Yep.
So the first thing was being able to go into a classroom. And one of the things that somebody said was, I think most people have their plan and they know. And some people did. But what we learned in that first year was two things. The other piece is we wanted to kick the program off with theater. So the other thing I learned as a young person is some people were like, well, I don't know if students will like theater. And this is a lesson. Never assume anything, especially about our children, unless it is about that they are capable of anything that they want to achieve. And so what we saw was, and learned together in that first year, was students were really excited to explore with each other, both in discussion and also through experiences, to dig deeper into who they were. I had one student who went through the year of our workshops with me, and he said, now I'm going to Dunwoody. And he kept saying, and he's with the counselor, and he said, I'm going to Dunwoody. And on the last workshop, I said, now, this was the last workshop of the year, and here's my home phone. And I remember somebody saying, you can't give your home phone. I was like, I'm giving my home phone 7 days a week. What if there's anything we didn't cover? And he came up to me and he said, Adrienne, I didn't fully apply, but I still really want to go there. So we learned, and then we went and we applied for Dunwoody together. So those were kind of the beginnings. And Lauda and I know that every day we are learning of how to, we're seeing things and how you never make assumptions. And what do we need to do today? We're in the thick of planning. What are students telling us that they need in this coming year?
What is Project Success in the context of Minneapolis Public Schools learning system?
Lauda, what would you say on that? Heading up all of our schools.
Yeah, I think Project Success and Minneapolis Public Schools learn what that they need each other. Project Success is in a very privileged position where we get to see every single student in the district. There's not a lot of, I can't think of a job in the school system that can say, I see every single student in class throughout the year, and I know all of them. Not a principal, not a counselor. I mean, they all have their sort of their cohorts, but a facilitator sees every single student month after month after month, and we provide information to teachers and school leaders of this is where they're at right now, and it's really a beautiful relationship where we can open up in a classroom. A student might open up and say something that informs the teacher of something that the teacher might never have heard that student say, but because we come in with our facilitators who know how to make things less scary, they take more risks, the students do, that they open up and they're more vulnerable, and they share things that are not inappropriate, but they share things that are about themselves, that then the teacher goes, I had no idea that you wanted to do that with your life. And we can't do that without the trust that the teacher has made and the relationship that the teacher has made with the students in class. So it really works well. We both work well together, but we learn every year that you can't just sleep on your same old activities. You can't just go in and assume that you know anything about the students. We spend a lot of time learning what the principals want in terms of a goal for that school's year for their school, and also how their community changes over time. We've seen that with many of our schools, that what if Adrienne was in a school maybe 20 something years ago, that's not what it looks like today. So we are always trying to be involved in community gatherings, parent meetings, things where we get to know more what is happening, and then we can adjust our programming based on that. And so that learning really does happen because we both see the importance of the two working together.
So let me see if I understand what you do, who you are, and you can correct me. I'm hearing you say, and what I've read is that your organization is one that works within the public school system. You're not a school. You don't graduate students yourself, but you work with all of the students in the Minneapolis public school systems, particularly from 6th grade to 12th grade. And you have a system or a process that engages students in their own classrooms, in their own settings. I took a note here when you were talking, Adrienne, because what popped out immediately is your approach of not taking students out of class, but going into a class is an approach of inclusion and not exclusion. You don't extract, you infuse by your presence. You insert yourself inside that learning environment and become part of that process. That's pretty cool. So am I reading it right? Am I hearing it right? Am I describing it right?
You really perfectly, Al, because it is about inclusion. It's also when you talk about how, and we haven't talked about that, but how do we do what we do? Is we have some people say you do so much, and we're like, yes, we do so much, but for one very important goal, which is our mission. But the part you're talking about, Al, which you just said perfectly, is the base of our programming, and what Lauda was talking about, where we see all students and where we include all students in the classroom, is we do workshops with every Minneapolis 6th through 12th grader every month in their classroom. So when you do that, you work with the majority of your students over time, which is the magic. Because I was in the classroom 12 years. I didn't start as an executive director. I was a facilitator. But nothing was better than going into 7th grade or 9th grade and students saying, Adrienne, and now we have that. You came back. And of course I got yo, Adrienne, because it was the 80s. You know, I mean, it was the 80s and the 90s. But the workshops are that foundation where it's month after month for 7 years. That's that curriculum that Lauda manages and our team has built and grown. But the second piece is we use art, we use theater. When you talk about what you do on Tuesdays, we are partners, deep partners with over 54 theaters. So every month outside of school, our students and families are invited to a play at Theater Moo, at the Guthrie, at the Penumbra, and 54 incredible theater partners. We brought over 5,000 kids to Hamilton. It's the magic. Wow. So we use art. And the other piece is we have an institute where we do certificates after school. And then lastly, we do expeditions. So Al, this part is outside of school. It's evenings and weekends. I once had a student say to me, "You guys are everywhere. We can't escape you." And I'm like, "You're right. We're in school, out of school, after school, summers." And the expeditions are our global experiences, our trips to Harvard, our trips to DC. There are outdoor adventures to the Boundary Waters and to the Apostle Islands. So we do all of our college and career tours, which we call expeditions, after school musicals. So it's all of those pieces. And just to go back to what you said, it's accessible. We have students over the years that have said, "I didn't go to one play, but I went to every college tour." Or "I went to every play, but I just went on a college tour last week." It is about those workshops that you talked about that is all inclusive. And my favorite part, and when I read about some of the things you've done and you've talked about, Al, is the challenges we face are not easy, and they're not fixed in 1 hour. And when we know that love and relationships are the key, that takes time. So my favorite part is when a student might say, "I don't want to do this, I don't want to think about this," but year 4, they say, I'm going on a college tour, or "I'm going to DC with you." That's the work. That is the program.
Let me bring my colleague, Brenda Lyle-Gray, and Brenda's a teacher too.
Yes.
So she's on the same path that you guys have been on and are on as an educator. She's
but a little bit longer.
in New Mexico. She joins from
37 years.
Wow. It's amazing.
I did have a question, Al. Thank you. And for either Adrienne or Laura, I am concerned about students of color. And I think, of course, COVID threw us into it, but I also know that a lot of students were so far behind even before COVID. And my question is, has Project Success walked into the arena of professional development for teachers, and especially with cultural and diversity training? That's what's hurting us right now, is that, number one, we don't have a lot of teachers of color. I remember one of the Secretary of Education, I worked with Governor Richardson here at the Public Education Department. And one of the things that I found amazing working on the Pueblos is that their test scores were sky high. And it was the fact of the family, of the professional development, of peer support. They had all of these entities that flowed together, but the key was that their teachers were so prepared. And they had your passion, but they didn't know how to implement to get to the teachers, and especially the new teachers. We have to have more trained educators. And we've been kind of like, especially over the past year, trying to figure out, how do we get to them? How do we build some type of mechanism where they're trained to understand that this young boy that came in at 8 o'clock this morning for a 7:30 bell, all of it wasn't his fault. But I can remember very key the woman next door that I could hear screaming at this kid. And I was saying, "But you don't know where he's come from." These are the things that we have to try, because it's all different now. Not only are they behind, but all of a sudden they need mental health training. Teachers need to know and be able to identify. And I read your information on your website. It's phenomenal what you do. And kudos to you for starting this. What is it, 20 years ago?
28 years.
That's great. It's great. And we need more of you. But we need Native Americans,
That's right.
Latinas, people who can translate for immigrant children. We've got this pot, and we can't just walk back and say, well, I can't deal with that. There's so much that we have to deal with. And for those of us who love children and have always done that, it's not easy. And
No.
your work is not easy, but it's admirable. So I hope that maybe there's some way. I read about the workshops, but if there are diversity workshops through your program that could maybe help teachers understand the students that they're teaching a lot better.
Interesting. Great comment. Thank you.
I'm gonna, Laura, you've got a lot of work in this area, but first of all, we have done some staff development, and we've just been asked to do more, and it's not our prime work, but we've done that over the years because of our work. But one thing I love that you said, Brenda, that I just want to comment on is, when you get older, you see things, and then after I'm on 3 decades, you start to see what's different and what isn't different and what works and what doesn't work. Not that you have to always be on the edge, but you go, that continues to be something. And one of the things you said that's so critical is not just teachers, but all of us. We have to see the whole child, and you have to be there to meet those needs that you're talking about, and what you just said, that and then we have to be trained on those pieces. And what I mean by that is the work we've done coming back in person this year. Let's just say that we just went on a trip to the Apostle Islands with students of all abilities, or we just took 200 students to the Boundary Waters, very diverse group of students, variety of different needs, expectations, experiences. It took probably 4 times the effort and the dollars that it normally takes to do it well, to the way you're talking about, Brenda. It's easy to say you don't fit this paradigm, so you can't go on the trip because you don't have this equipment, you don't have this ride, you might not have been able to get a test for the vaccine, whatever it might be. So one thing I think you're saying that's critical is not only what we need to do, but we need to continue to train, is how to truly meet students, every one of them, where they are. And if we're teaching or we're offering experiences like we do, you have to meet that whole child where they are. And we have to, and what you're saying is we have to all keep learning on how to do that and deliver that. But Laura, I would just, we work with incredible teachers, and Laura's I want to see what you would add to that, Laura.
I want to add, Laura, before you, and please excuse me, but I just wanted to add to Adrienne's comments that we need to get to the colleges that are training. That curriculum has got to change. It has to be different in order to be relevant and for that student to want to come back to school the next day. They got to, now we have to build a reason, because they have so many layers that they're dealing with. They're dealing with violence. They're dealing with some of them right here in Santa Fe, a capital city. We have 4,000 homeless students. And I'm going to be working with, on the week, just on Saturdays, but working with some of the teachers from the district to say, how are we going to train, especially new teachers and young teachers coming in? Because the paradigm's different now. And they don't have those lived experiences. Where Al and I grew up, we had some of the finest teachers in a segregated area, and 70 years later, we remember those teachers. because they gave us, not only were they living our lived experiences, but their expectations for us were out of the roof. And that's what the title of your organization, Project Success, that's what they expected of us. So we've got, I thought of the guy from Minnesota State, I believe, Indian, PhD, impressive, just wonderful young man. And I wanted to say, how are we training our teachers? It's not in a textbook. It just isn't. So, Laura, I want to hear your comment on professional development real quick, and then I'll give it back to my boss. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This is a very important critical piece in our training for our facilitators is adolescent brain development, culturally responsive teaching. We use many different people have been doing that work for many years, but what we love is taking what we know as our objective, which is to facilitate and not to teach someone's success, but to facilitate their own discovery in their success, and using their cultural background, their lived experience, their family, or what they have learned growing up. How does that end up contributing to their success as well? So strength, asset building, as opposed to constantly looking at the deficit of a young person. So we spend a lot of time doing that. We've been asked to train educators as well, because we've done a lot of work in that area with our own team. And I think something that you said is something that I've been thinking about for years, which is why I chose to go into this field as opposed to the classroom teacher field, which is I know many teachers that wish that they had more more education around culturally relevant teaching, diversity teaching, and I think and I think what we do at Project Success is there's no way to have the workshops or the conversations without non-judgmentally addressing and seeing what is happening in our community, what is happening in their particular lives, what is happening in the school community, and because of that, we are responding to their lived experiences by doing that. And then lastly, I will say that you're absolutely right that we've had educators who were able to really work well with our students, and you can see how they come to class. They want to come, they want to try hard, because the teachers say I have high expectations for you. The number one thing that I consider a poor judgment on any adult in a young person's life is when they say, "Oh, it's okay, you don't have to do it today. It's okay, you don't have to come in tomorrow. You're having a hard day. It's okay, you can sit in the corner and put your head down." Or and I think that there's something about that makes young people go, "Oh, I guess I don't have to try hard ever." And that's what we try meeting them at a balance point. Yeah, you might have had, you came in late because of something. I'm not going to make assumptions. You might need a minute to kind of collect yourself, but then I'm going to expect that you are in this with us because you're here and you showed up. And that's what we do with our.
I think the problem that we face, and one of our esteemed colleagues, Dr. McFarlane, always mentions the fact that 87% of our teachers are white in the public schools. And that has to change.
That's right.
Not to say that, all students who are Black should have Black teachers, but at least those that they have should understand that their lived experience, their family's experience, COVID, racial upheaval, because a lot of the kids, I mean, I'm 75 years old. George Floyd and Emmett Till will stay there in my mind. And a lot of the kids are like that. We were taught that, and we were taught responsibility. You know, I had a real bad fall and I've been in pain, but my responsibility was to my boss, and I learned that at 15. You know, if it got real bad, I'd say I can't do it, but you go the extra mile. So I would just like to see colleges look at
That's right.
what they are looking at as far as training and preparation for the teachers who are coming in to these classrooms. And, you know, I never will forget Mari at North High.
Yeah.
And she had a group of teachers at the beginning of because I loved her. I did this great article on her right before she came into this meeting. A child was shot in front of the school. And so she stood in front of her faculty and she said, "You have 1 hour and you're going to have to make a decision. Is this what you want to do? Are you willing to take the risk? Are you willing to research? Are you willing to become a better teacher and a better person for these children?" And it was real quiet, but I thought it was interesting because she had these two dynamics of getting on the intercom and saying, "I know that you're upset," and then getting to her faculty and saying, "This is what you're up against.
That's right.
But we can do this." And then at the end of her conversation, she said, "And children, I want you to know that I love you." And I was just like, okay, that's what we need.
That's it.
They need to know that they're loved. And so do the teachers. They need to know that they're appreciated.
That's right.
So I hope it changes. I am concerned. I don't know if I'd want to be in a classroom right now. And I taught international baccalaureate. And it was, I mean, I was learning with the kids. It was a great curriculum. But some of them were saying, "Oh, Miss Gray, we're not prepared for this." Yes, you are. Because George Perry told Al and Kamal and Burnell and myself, "You are worthy of it and you can do this." Well, Burnell ended up being a dean and of 2 colleges. Kamal was an attorney for Coca-Cola. The media mogul has been going for over 4 decades and touching people all over the world. And I wrote a book and titled it and didn't even know how to pronounce the title of the book. It was a spiritual book and it was one of God's productions, really not mine. But we came out okay.
Yeah.
We did okay because we had people that loved us.
Yeah.
And we had parents that stood up for us. And that's another thing. Eventually, Project Success can't do everything, but we need to teach parents now how to be parents because it's a different ballgame.
Let me ask Adrienne and Laura to look at Minneapolis public schools from 1995 up to now. That's the 28 years, I think, or somewhere around that. And what were the demographics then? What were the challenges of change? What change has come to pass? And what is the same? What is different? Finally, what do you see as the future? That's a big, loaded question.
It's a
But it
great
gives
first
you-
question.
It gives you a chance to flow
Yeah.
and to contextualize the mission and the work. Finally, let me ask you both to take this time to invite our viewers and listeners to support. You know, what do you need people to do to support financially, politically, emotionally, materially, any way, the vision and the work, the lives of the children and the lives of your colleagues in this work and dream. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys and just flow with it.
I'm gonna just there's a lot there, and I would just, the first thing that came to mind, again, growing up in the Minneapolis schools, is that I grew up and went to the schools. I was in middle school in the 70s and then high school in the 80s. So I went through, and I grew up on a street with, you may know these names, Cynthia Tyson and Ida Lorraine Wilderson.
Sure.
So I sat on their stoop often, and they worked for Minneapolis Public Schools, and they worked to desegregate the schools in the 70s. And I was right there. Then I went into high school, and they closed the schools, and we went through those closings. And then as Project Successes, that started at North High in 93, 94. Al, what struck me with your question is that piece around there are certain things that have not changed. Brenda, what you said is still, we need representation. We need to love our students, and we need all of our students reflected in the adults that work with our students and our families. What has changed is, so some things haven't changed, which are those pieces which don't ever cease to amaze me. But when I still work with kids, which is not as much, but when I go on experiences, or Lauda and I just chaperoned, I'll call me the old lady, Lauda, but chaperoned a trip to DC. What doesn't change is what love and belief and experiencing things together and learning together, that is so critical. That doesn't change. What has changed is, we all know this, but the mental health of students, the mental health of our teachers and our educators, the poverty level is real. Like, we know, we see it as a statistic, but when you see how many things are needed on top of what's needed today, different than years ago, it's palpable. When we talk about experience of excellence and high quality, it takes a lot more to get there. But that hope and students' belief in themselves, and the other thing I think that is greater, Loud, and I've talked about this coming back into classes, students know what's going on. They know what's real. They're in it. And they want to work. I had a student, I want to work on my future. So let's get to work. But we're going to change these things. So I've seen some things change and some haven't, but the stress and that mental health and those needs that are there are very different. And obviously we have a much more diverse population, and we also have more, obviously, the number of languages and the richness in our global community, as well as back when I was in school and when we started, there weren't obviously we know so much more about kids with all abilities, with different intelligence, with special needs that need to be seen and how those are addressed. So those are just some of the differences. But Laura, I don't know, you've been here 15 years, so you've got, what would you say is different? And then we can talk about the future.
Yeah, I would just add, I think you're right. And I would just add that, initiatives that come from either the federal government or state or school district change very frequently. So it might be that, at one time we were all operating, well, not all, but the idea was that we were all going to operate under one particular idea of how kids are successful. And funding's involved in this, and policies are involved in this, and all of that, and then all of a sudden, they give it 2 years, and then it changes, and then there's another initiative, and it just continues to never let something actually see if it works, one, and two, it puts people in a lot of building phase. Build a program that fits this initiative, and then nope, never mind, done, now build a new one. And over the course that I've been here, I think that I have seen maybe 3 or 4 different initiatives that have met, quote unquote, the social emotional needs of students, and all of them have different names, different funding policies, and that just, to me, it really leaves a real unstable sort of feeling when you're trying to just meet students where they're at, and talk about I feel, I feel like communities change depending on also what's happening socioeconomically. And so because of that, we're starting to see, like right now, we're starting to see teachers leave the district, and it breaks my heart. Leadership that are incredibly passionate and good at their and amazing at their job leave, and it just breaks my heart that we have to say goodbye to them, and they go to other places and do other things. But
Laura, what's your personal background? Are you from Minneapolis as well?
so
How,
I
how have
actually
you come to the work?
I grew up with a big educator family in Colorado, and I moved here 16 years ago. Now 17 years ago, to specifically work in theater and in education, and I found Project Success. But I have been working alongside educators probably since I was 10, 11 years old, being a youth leader in other types of programming that were helping young Mexican and Latino students be advocates for their own education, and I continue to have a passion for that. But here in Minnesota, I work specifically learning more about the difference between SEL, 21st century skills, the all of the assets, the 40 developmental assets, all of these like incredibly robust initiatives around social emotional learning, but just trying to see how do we not just flip the switch every couple years, is what I'm trying to figure out just within our own organization. Yeah, that's my background.
Yeah.
So here's a proposition for you all to consider, and I raise the question in light of the changing demographics: more Somali, more African immigrant and African American, more Latino, more Hmong Asian families in Twin Cities in the district, the browning of this community. On the one hand, does effective education learning mean or lead to the dismantling of institutions that have ill-served our populations? One could argue that what we have produced up to now has not enriched the lives of individuals in a way that is expansive, immersive, and systemic, but rather continue to marginalize those that didn't fit the mold of what this image of American society is. That's a nice way of saying we elevate and celebrate white culture, white identity, and denigrate and suppress other identities, other awarenesses, and other systems of assembling the world, of gathering reality that could also lead to fulfillment for individuals consistent with their cultural understanding and awareness. What do you think?
The question about getting dismantle the systems.
And it might not be a fair question, and you can ignore it if you want to.
It's interesting because I think I go to one of the reasons I'm still doing this 28 years later is Laura said this, and you asked the question about how do we interact with the district. We work with many partners and many systems. In some ways, we're fortunate because we're on our own, and we get to work within, but we get to make decisions fast, we get to do that. And that is, in my way, what I've considered that's the heart of the work and how I think about disruption in my own. It's like one child at a time. So for me, when I do think about how do we fix things, schools, I often think about how do we fix the financial system, because it's kind of that boring system of how schools are funded. But how do you fix anything if you don't fix those core systems? So Al, the answer for me is I don't know, because that's not my expertise, but I do know where I've been able, with our work, what we've been able to do to disrupt some of those systems. I also, I'll just say your question about what do we need, and when I think about that question is, I was checking out at the grocery store this weekend and had my PS bracelet on, and this young woman said, "Wait, you're Project Success?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I loved Project Success. I graduated from South 2 years ago." And I said, "Well, why did you love?" She said, "I loved the college tours and I loved the theater, but you and my facilitator was with me." And then I said, and then we were checking out, and she said, "You need to do this for more people."
Mhm.
Because my peers that didn't get to go on college tours and didn't have like a coach. So I know what we need to do is do more of something that's working.
Mm.
Brenda, I think your question, like when you were talking, and one of my requests is, can we talk offline? I think we should come see you. But
Yeah,
you know,
because I was getting ready to tell you, Adrienne, about J. Paul Getty's discipline-based art education. I
okay,
was trained in that, and I tell you, it was the most fantastic curriculum that I'd
okay,
ever seen. Are
okay.
we still funding schools now with tax base? Is that how they're doing it, property tax?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But then we don't have people researching grants, philanthropic organizations that support different programming. I'm going to get back to his last question though, because I'll continue to talk and we'll talk offline.
Okay. I would love that.
Yeah, but he needs to close in because he'll have questions hanging.
Well, just finish up. I think I wanted to give you and Adrienne and Laura the opportunity to, again, contextualize and say to our viewers, listeners, our readers, what is needed to support you and your vision. You just said the evidence of that is the meeting in the grocery store of someone
That's
who said,
great.
you need to have more kids. How do we help you do that?
Laura, what would you say? And I'll add to that.
We, because we're an access organization, we rely on volunteers to provide transportation, to staff events, to be greeters at certain things. I mean, we really rely on that help. And there's so many different ways people can volunteer for Project Success. And then of course, I think it's the sharing of, if there are financial ways that they can share to Project Success, those are greatly appreciated and used directly to serve students. And those are the two things I would say.
Okay.
I think too, we're continuing to do more of this, but our students and our alumni that work here, that volunteer here, we have worked with over 210,000 students and their families over 28 years. So if you're listening to this and you're an alum, I would say we want to work with you. We want to hear from you. We want you to volunteer. This is going to be, we took many years to achieve our goal of working with every 6th through 12th grader in Minneapolis, and we want to expand that work. So we need volunteers, any financial support you can give, and we need your partnership. And the last thing, Al, and then you've helped us do this, which we are so honored to be on this show, is we have to share the story.
Yeah.
Tell your story and get that word out there. We appreciate it.
Well, listen, this has been a wonderful hour. I so appreciate you taking the time to tell the story. For me, it's about creating new narratives,
Yes.
creating a different understanding, one that values our dignity, our history, our story,
Right.
our experience. Brenda kept saying it, our lived experiences. These are invaluable, and we have to assign that worth and act and walk in the worth of our own reality and our existence, treasuring it and expecting that the world honors who we are, what we know, and where we go together as human beings. Listen, thank you so much. You are invited to show up here anytime you want to, whatever we can do at Insight News and at the conversation program to support you and your work. We are pleased to do. You're welcome to do guest editorials in the newspaper. So think of ways creatively you can engage our platforms to support your work and your families.
And you are to be truly celebrated for your work. 28 years and 200 and how many students?
210,000 students and their
Wow.
families together.
What can you say about that? We need to clone you for the classrooms. 70 years later, and Al and I remember our great teachers. We can name them.
Yes, so do I.
Yep.
You're right. We need to do more as a community, and just thank you, because we're going to be connected again very soon.
We will. And I celebrate.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brenda.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you. Well, Brenda, what do you think? It's a good conversation. Awesome.
Thank you.
And Brenda, thank you for weighing in all the immense body of knowledge that you bring to this conversation. Is just a treasure. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Well, I thought it was great, and I think your program is phenomenal. We just need to get to these colleges with teacher training. But we will.
Okay.
Not just in Minneapolis. We need it across the country.
Well, tomorrow we'll be back with our friends. I call our group the Companions. So unscripted conversation, but looking at the world as we see it. You know, either tomorrow or later in the week, we'll be connecting with our friend from Colombia, Jesus Chucho Garcia, the diplomat who is a freedom fighter, revolutionary, actually. He might not use that language, but I do. But he's worked in throughout South America, Central America. He's been on assignment from Venezuela to Mali and to Angola, other West African countries, but he's connecting with a colleague in Mali. And I'm not sure if that's going to happen tomorrow or happen Friday, but I'm looking forward to that conversation. And our goal is to make this connectivity a regular expression, a regular experience, so that we see ourselves, as you said, globally connected and moving all of us together towards our best future. Well, Brenda, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
It was a great page and insight with them, though. Loved it.
All right. Take care.